This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and thank you for choosing the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, where we talk all the news and latest, greatest news in the world of sports. As always, I'm Alex, alone today, as I always am on Tuesday. Ben and Anthony will be joining us again tomorrow, of course. Today we're going to talk some football, specifically the Monday night game between the Packers and the Eagles that took place last night. We'll talk a little bit of college football as we head into tonight's new rankings of the college football playoffs. And we'll talk about just some sports in general, some basketball, I know for sure. As we get going today on Tuesday, in one of the last of November, I believe the last Tuesday of November, the 29th. Excuse me. And I want to start by talking about the, like I said, the Monday Night Football game. I'm going to take a break, of course, talk college, and then talk basketball. But first I want to talk about last night's Green Bay Packer-Philadelphia Eagle game, a game in which Jeremiah and I picked the Eagles to win this one. The defense we thought was going to be better. We thought the Packers were going to, give them chances. The running game for the Eagles was going to, do better. The pass rush of the Eagles was going to get to Rodgers, and it was kind of the opposite. The Packers win this one 27-13 over the Eagles. Aaron Rodgers on the game was 30 for 39, 313 yards, and 2 scores. He was not sacked. He did not turn the ball over. He was the epitome of efficiency. Pretty good. The running game wasn't great. 74 yards as a total. James Starks leading the way there. 17 rushes for 41 yards. They did finally get a rushing touchdown from fullback Aaron Ripkowski. He had 3 carries for 1 yard total, but he did end up with a touchdown there on the goal line. So they have a touchdown from a running back this year, albeit a fullback. We look at their receivers. Devontae Adams had a big day. He had both of the Aaron Rodgers touchdowns there. 5 of his receptions for 113 yards, and like I said, those 2 touchdowns. 5 receptions on 6 targets also. Jordan Nelson was somewhat of the go-to guy a lot of the time last night. 8 receptions, 91 yards on 12 targets. Randall Cobb came in right behind them at 6 for 41. And James Starks, 5 for 27 there, rounding out the multiple catch getters. That kind of helped the offense continue moving last night for the Packers. We look at the Eagles. Carson Wentz, 24 for 36, 254 yards, but he was sacked 4 times for a total of minus 43 yards, and he had an interception. I think after halftime, he took a big hit from back-to-back plays there by the Packers, mainly from Mike Daniels. Kind of stung him a bit, and he threw an interception to HaHa Clinton-Dix. Looks like he overthrew his man. I'm not sure if it was injury caused. He did seem to be landing on his ribs, so kind of might have been hurting him there, but we don't know that for sure. We look at the Eagles' the rushing numbers for them. Wendell Smallwood, kind of led the way for them, 9 for 37. But Carson Wentz had 4 for 33, and he added a touchdown. Not one passing, though, just 1 rushing on the night. Pretty athletic run for him on that one, and one of a few on the night as well. Darren Sproles only 3 for 6 as he's coming back from injury, and we had a couple of rushes from Bryce Treggs and Kenyon Barner. We look at their receivers. Dorial Green-Beckham was the leading receiver on the night for them on 82 yards on 6 catches. Darren Sproles 5 for 48, so he did add a bit in the passing game. And Jordan Matthews 4 for 47. Zach Ertz 3 for 36, but he's had some drops throughout the game. He did have a long of 20, so the majority of one of his catches, was his majority of his yardage. And they had a fumble. Each team had a fumble in this one, as a matter of fact, but they were each able to corral them. Now, this was a weird game because for a while, there wasn't much really going on in this one. There was big plays, but a lot of times there was penalties that kind of negated the big plays. I would say for the most part, this game was pretty. It seemed pretty decided from early on, in my opinion. Excuse me. The possession was led for the Packers by almost 11 minutes total, more than the Eagles. I think a lot of that had to do with the fourth quarter. Also, the Packers pretty much had the ball the entire time in the fourth quarter. It seemed like, and a big part of their win was they were 10 for 14 on third down. The Eagles, on the other hand, 5 for 11. Excuse me. About almost 10 more plays than the Eagles. The Packers had about 70 more yards. Only one more drive, but like I said, they pretty much handled the ball the entire fourth quarter, it seemed like. Excuse me. This game, though, was, it wasn't a great Monday night game. It wasn't a lot of turnovers. It wasn't really boring, but it seemed to lack something. There wasn't much going on. There might be a effect of. That might be an effect of, say, the Sunday night game, I suppose. And that was such a, good game in a lot of people's eyes on how it was set up to end. So I suppose maybe that game led to this one. Maybe not being looked at as great of a game, but it was still an entertaining game. And now you look at the Packers; they're 5-6. In what they can consider as was a must-win game, I suppose. You look at their upcoming schedule, and they go on. They have the Texans coming up at home in Lambeau, and the Seahawks, and then they're at the Bears, home for the Vikings, and at the Lions. Now, they beat the Lions once this year by one touchdown because that's all the Lions do. They either win or lose by one score. The Texans, they are coming off a loss. They're not playing at home where they were undefeated before this weekend. That's going to be an interesting game, as well as the Seahawks game. The Seahawks have been playing well this year, but they did just have a game where they only put up 5 points. The Bears, I think that should be a win for them. The Vikings, they're not the Vikings that beat the Packers earlier in the year on Monday night, I would say. There's some issues with this team. And the Packers are getting healthier at the right time. They're getting some pieces back, not as many as they would want. They are losing pieces at the same time. Clay Matthews is battling a shoulder injury now. He got hurt at one point in the game last night. Excuse me. So, they have to really manage those injuries as best they can, because the next few weeks are really going to be able to determine whether or not they're going to be in this playoff run. Like I said, they are, as it stands, 5-6. They win against the Texans. That makes them 6-6. And then say they're in it with the Seahawks 7-6, and then from there, they're really shooting to win out. Obviously, they have 5 games left. They're trying to sit at 10-6, possibly. The best they can. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because this team is not the Packers team that you would expect it to be. As it stands, they are 7th in the league in passing yards. Points forward, they are 11th, but they're 25th in the NFL in points against. They're not stopping many people. But they did do, a good job of that last night. So if they can turn the table, then we can be talking, a potential wild card for them. It's definitely a possibility. We look at the Eagles, who started the year off so well. 3 straight wins. Then they lose to the Lions and the Redskins, and they beat the Vikings, and they lose again for 2 weeks. Beat the Falcons and lose again for 2 weeks. It's like they win, they lose 2. They win, they lose 2. They win, they lose 2. And now they're back for the Bengals this upcoming week. Redskins, Ravens, Giants, Cowboys. Bengals, they could possibly win that one. Excuse me, the Bengals playing this off year of football that the Bengals have really seemed to not just fluky, like just really not embrace willingly, but it definitely it seems like that's the way this season's going to go for the Bengals. The Redskins, they're a good team. They're playing good ball. They're ahead of the Eagles in third place right now for the division. You have the Ravens after that, who are currently in first place in the AFC North. You have the Giants, who are in second place in this NFC East and playing well at 8-3. And then you have Cowboys, who, just leading the division at 10-1 as it stands. So it's going to be tough. I mean, they finished 3 of their last 5 games against teams within their division and teams obviously better than them because, the Eagles are in last place. So they're going to have to do a lot to even be considered, in this. They're going to have to win out probably. And I don't see that happening. So unfortunately for the Eagles, great start, a lot of young pieces, but they're probably going to fall short this year. After having an undefeated preseason, starting the year off, 3 straight wins, they're probably going to fall short. And that's, it was asking a lot for a rookie quarterback and a rookie coach in their first year together to do what they were expected to do when they were 3-0. Looked at it as one of the real good teams in the NFC to start the year. Excuse me. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go forth from here. They have a lot of big games coming up, and they really need to win them all. All right, we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk some college football here in just a minute at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. It's time to talk a little college football as it stands. We have the college football playoff rankings, of course, coming out tonight. And I said this last week, and it's kind of funny, too. I said this last week where I said this, as in last Tuesday. So this countdown doesn't really matter. This ranking doesn't really matter as much as next week's is going to matter because we had all the rivalry games. And at the same time, as much as this one matters, next week is really the one that matters. Weirdly enough, because then we're going to have a really, then that's after the championship games, you have a team like Penn State playing in the Big Ten championship, a game that Ohio State is not playing in, being ranked more than likely 2 after tonight, 2 in the AP poll as of right now. It's going to be really interesting to see how this is set up. Are you still going to have a team like, Michigan up there because of the fact that they lost, yet Penn State is the one really playing in the championship, So it's going to be interesting to see how this shapes out next week. But tonight, I assume it's going to look pretty similar to the AP Top 25. You have Bama number 1, they're not moving anywhere. Ohio State was at 2 and they won. I doubt they're moving. Clemson's probably going to move up into the spot that was voided by Michigan when they left. Or vacated, I should say, not voided. And Washington probably is going to move into that 4 spot, which is big for Washington because they're back in the top 4 after losing to USC earlier in the year, who is at 10 in the countdown now in the AP poll. You have Colorado right by them. The team that's playing in the Pac-12 championship game against Washington, a team that could beat Washington. So does that number 4 spot get vacated in favor of, good Lord, Michigan possibly getting back in there, Wisconsin, Penn State making the unbelievable jump, doubtful, but you have Oklahoma there at 7. Is there any scenario where they get in? Clemson loses this weekend, Washington loses as well. Is there any way Oklahoma gets up in there, or do they not let them jump Wisconsin? Are they going to keep? Is Michigan done in the sense, yeah, they're at 5 now in this playoff poll, or at least this AP poll. Is that too, insurmountable for Michigan now after losing 2 games? Can they justify a 2-loss team in the playoffs? Well, they'd be doing so by letting Wisconsin or Oklahoma or Penn State in. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I'm not jealous at all of the college football playoff voters. I think 1, 2, 3, 4 is easy this week. I think next week couldn't be so easy, maybe not. In my eyes, at least. We have a lot of the championship games this week. We have a lot of bowl games being announced coming up. Pretty much as it stands, though, those top 4 teams I don't think are changing. Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, Washington, I think. And if it ended today, we'd have Alabama playing Washington, Ohio State playing Clemson. Those would be some good games. Alabama, Washington, similar teams in terms of strong defenses. Offenses are not bad. I might give the offensive edge to Washington with the way Jake Browning's playing. And then similar teams with Ohio State and Clemson, dual threat quarterbacks. Kind of spread offenses at times. The offense isn't always the strong suit for them, but they put up points. It's an interesting, way to looking at it. I would enjoy those games, I think. Now we look at where, some of these teams sit that could really upset that order. Obviously, Ohio State's not in the Big Ten championship. Penn State's playing in that one. Penn State is playing this weekend, as a matter of fact, in that game, obviously, and they're playing Wisconsin. So one of those is going to affect the other. So if Penn State beats Wisconsin, obviously they're not in the top 10 maybe even anymore. And then same thing, if Wisconsin beats Penn State, then they're actually in a nice position because they're sitting at 6 now. Say Washington loses to Colorado. I don't know if Michigan's going to get back in there. That would be really interesting to see what happens there. Excuse me. We have Clemson this week. And Clemson is playing Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. Virginia Tech, not a bad team. 6-2, 9-3 overall, 6-2 within the conference, of course. 9-3, couple wins behind Clemson. A good year for Virginia Tech. They're sitting, as it stands right now, decently high up there in the playoff rankings. So it's really, and I don't pity these. I don't know if I pity these guys. I'm not jealous of these guys, to say the least. Virginia Tech 19th, as I said. So a lot of big games this weekend. I'm excited because this is a big week for college football. You have Alabama in the SEC championship game against Florida. Florida ranked 15th. People assume Alabama's going to win that one. Even if they lost, they'd probably still be in that number 1 position. Let's be real. And then there's the whole argument that Ohio State isn't even in their championship game. How can you have them at number 2? You look at the strength of the team, obviously. Clemson's in theirs. Washington's in theirs. So, really the only team that in the top 4 that's not is Ohio State. And if Michigan would have won, they wouldn't have been either. It's really an interesting playoff this year as opposed to the last few years. I think this is one of the more interesting ones since the first year that they had it, honestly. I think it's going to be a good one, too. As it stands, Penn State's playing Wisconsin. Neither of these teams are in the championship game. You're going to have those people arguing. But I think it's more cut and dry with the other 3. Bama, obviously, right there. Clemson, right there. Washington, right there. So I think it's always 1 or 2 teams that really, shake things. BC, we had TCU, Baylor a few years ago that everybody was, questioning who would be in and why they'd be in and what makes one better than the other, and win-loss record and head-to-head and all that. It's always one team that kind of shakes things up, and this year it's going to be Ohio State. They're not an undefeated team. They're not a guaranteed in kind of team. It's different. It's more in depth than that. And I can't wait for next week's playoff rankings. But after today, tomorrow, of course, we will talk about what happens in tonight's playoff rankings and who's sitting where. Excuse me, and what the rest of the poll looks like other than just the top 4. And of course, we'll talk about that tomorrow. So we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back, our last break, come back, and we're going to talk a little bit of just sports, a little bit of basketball, some scores from the week, and some players that are just averaging insane numbers to start the season. So We'll do that real quick, and we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
And we're back here at the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast. And to end the show, we're going to talk a little bit of basketball. Some players that are really starting this year off very well. Specifically, let's start with Russell Westbrook of the Oklahoma City Thunder with 27 points, 18 rebounds, and 14 assists against the Knicks yesterday in their 112-103 win. Russell Westbrook is now averaging a triple-double and doing so later in the season than any player has since Oscar Robertson in 1963 to the 64 season. So, as it stands, he's averaging 30.9 points, 10.3 rebounds, and 11.3 assists in 19 games this season. He is only one of only 5 in NBA history to average a triple-double for more than 5 games into the season. That is pretty insane, seeing as people look at, the Thunder. At one point, you had Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and you had Durant there. You had a big three of their own, and now it's just Russell Westbrook, and everybody's saying, well, how good is he by himself? We saw a little bit of it last year when Durant was injured. Well, he's pretty good. The only player to average a triple-double over the course of a full season was Robertson. He posted 30.8 points a game, 12.5 rebounds, and 11.4 assists in the 1961-62 season. The era Robertson played in, though, featured much faster-paced games with around 25 more possessions, 30 more available rebounds, and 30 more shots per game. So pretty good, if you ask me. And again, he's only one of 3 players because Oscar Robertson did it 3 times. Magic Johnson is the other one to do so in 1981-82, and he did that for 8 games. But since Oscar Robertson in the 63-64 season, this is the longest anybody's gone into a game doing so. So very impressive to say the least there for Russell Westbrook, and we'll see how long he can keep this up. Some more notable scores in the NBA last night. We had the Golden State Warriors over the Atlanta Hawks, 105-100. The Jazz over the Minnesota Timberwolves, 112-103. Charlotte Hornets over the Memphis Grizzlies, 104-85. Boston defeats Miami, 112-104. Toronto, 122 over Philly at 95. And then the Wizards beat the Kings 101-95. But in this one, the Kings center DeMarcus Cousins had 37 points and 11 rebounds, his 23rd career game with at least 35 and 10, the most in the NBA since he came into the league in 2010-2011. DeMarcus Cousins had all those points. Rudy Gay had 22 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and the Kings beat the Brooklyn on Sunday. But in this game, again, he had 37 points, 11 rebounds. They don't win the game. You know what I mean? I don't understand. They weren't making their shots. He's averaging, as it stands, 28.7 points a game. They're playing great offensively at times, yet they're losing all these games as it stands at 7-11 in the Pacific Division. They're 4th. Kings center, though, DeMarcus Cousins has 4 straight 30-point games now, the longest streak by any Kings player since the great Chris Webber had 4 straight in 2001. So that is a pretty big deal. We'll see, if they can keep winning. They have the 76ers tomorrow. The 76ers, of course, are not having the greatest of years currently. They are sitting at 4-14, so we'll see where they can go from there. The NBA season so far has been a good one. I'm enjoying it. Being from Sacramento, I went to a few Kings games already in the new Golden One Center. That's pretty great. I have yet to go to any games outside of those Kings games. I think I want to check out a Warriors game this year. See Kevin Durant. He played well last night, 25 points, 14 rebounds, and the Warriors win. He has 12th straight game for them to win. So, they're playing well. That'd be nice. You have the brow over there. Anthony Davis leads the NBA in bolstering 3.16 average. He's playing well, even if the Pelicans are not. A lot of guys are starting the season off well, and it's not the typical guys, so that's nice. It's nice to get a little variety, I think, in sports nowadays. You know, you look at the NFL and the MVP talks. It's not the Rodgers and the Mannings and Brady's around, but it's not the Cam Newton's. It's not the typical guys. It's Ezekiel Elliott and Derek Carr, and Tom Brady is in there too, but it's not the same old, and I think so far with the way this year starts, you have the typical guys. You have Westbrook and Durant's playing well, but Anthony Davis is playing really well. You have Cousins playing well. You have guys like Isaiah Thomas playing well. So it's definitely a good start to the year. Al Horford, he's missing some time because of personal reasons, but he's playing well this year. So it is nice to see the variety in sports and basketball so far this year has definitely brought it. All right. So tomorrow we'll be back, all three of us, to discuss tonight's college football playoff rankings. We're going to talk any football, any news that comes in the meantime. Of course, anything and everything that pops up, we will talk about it as long as we have time. And it happens while we're recording, seeing as we record pretty early in the day. The morning, as a matter of fact, as it stands 4 minutes to 8 here. So we'd like to thank you, as always, for listening to the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast. For Anthony and for Ben, and occasionally for Jeremiah, I am Alex. I thank you guys for listening. We will talk to you tomorrow. You guys have a good rest of your day and enjoy your sports.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.